Most of y'all probably know the story of Clara Driscoll, Adina de Zavala, and how the Alamo was mostly saved from ruin. Both of these women were dedicated to the cause, but Clara brought cash to the table. If Clara hadn't had buckets of money, things might have gone a different way. This is the story of how a cigar-smoking Corpus Christi cattle queen inadvertently helped Clara save the Alamo. In 1848, Martha Reagan married John Rabb, a descendant of one of Austin's old 300. She had a wealth of curly brown hair and beautiful gray eyes. Her friends called her Maddie. In 1857, John invested in 400 acres near Banquete in Nueces County and commenced a stock raising operation. He and Martha had 6 or 7 kids together, depending on who you ask, and John did pretty well for himself. He chose for his cattle brand a bow and arrow design. When John Rabb died in 1872, he left Martha a splendid gift, a quantity of livestock rivaled only by the King and Kennedy ranches. 10,000 head of cattle and 3,500 head of sheep. But Widow Rabb didn't sell out. Instead, she took the land and cattle and turned them into more land and cattle. For the next 3 years, she bought until she had turned that 400 acres into nearly 30,000. Then she had it all enclosed with 23 miles of wooden fence at a cost of about $23,000. In 1876, she added 2 enormous watering tanks to the ranch, ordered a new windmill, and erected a ranch house there. Oh, and in the midst of all of this ranch business, in the spring of 1876, Martha began construction on the most conspicuous display of her wealth, the largest mansion on the bluff in Corpus Christi. She called it Magnolia Mansion. That year, she planned to fatten up 12 to 15,000 head of cattle. And that she did. In the fall, she sold her bow and arrow branded cattle to a firm from St. Louis. Sale price, $140,000, or about $4 million in today's money. She oversaw the delivery of the cattle herself. Mrs. Rabb was an educated, refined woman by all accounts. She was certainly raised that way, but man, was she full of hustle. She handled all the buying and selling of the livestock and the land herself. And she preferred to conduct business in kegs of gold or silver coin rather than traffic in greenbacks. She was known to hop up on the fence and sit for hours to oversee the branding of her stock, and she always had a cigar in her mouth. In 1879, 53-year-old Martha, now a widow for 7 years and one of the richest women in the state, met a handsome preacher 15 years her junior, Reverend Rabb Rogers. He was a new widower, and he took a shine to the rich cattle dame. They were married, and his 6 children, aged 2 to 14, came to live in Magnolia Mansion. Now, Martha's grown kids did not approve of this union because they figured that Reverend Rogers was a little bit of a gold digger. And their mother didn't exactly go out of her way to blend the families either. A portrait of her late husband hung in the parlor of Magnolia Mansion. After she remarried, though, she removed the portrait of Mr. Rabb to an interior wall of the mansion's outhouse. 2 of her sons never spoke to her again. Her new husband, the Reverend, quit preaching and pursued a career in politics, which of course meant a move to Austin. So Martha sold the ranch, called Rabb's Pasture or Rabb's Ranch, to Darius Syriac Rochelle in May 1884 for $240,000. 43,000 acres at $4 an acre plus 3,500 head of cattle at the going price of $18 a head. That netted the former Reverend and his wife about $8 million of today's dollars. The ranch, when she sold it, stretched from north of Robstown south to present-day Driscoll. It was bounded on the west by Banquete Creek and on the east by present-day Calicote Road. Here is a questionable rendering by yours truly of the approximate bounds of Martha's ranch. When she died in 1901, Martha left what remained of her money to her second husband and her stepchildren. Her own children tried to contest the will, but to no avail. A historical marker was placed in her honor just south of Robstown in 1992. When her Magnolia Mansion was razed, the Corpus Christi Cathedral was built on its footprint. So tip your hat to Miss Martha next time you pass the cathedral. So how do we get from Martha Rabb Rogers' cattle fortune to the Alamo? Okay, in 1885, there was a drought. And so the Rochelle family, who had bought the Rabb Ranch from Martha, needed to unload some of their holdings. They sold the Rabb pasture land for less than half of what they paid for it to Robert Driscoll, father of Clara Driscoll, in 1886. Sale price, $93,000. Ouch. They paid $240K for it. By 1890, Robert Driscoll was a multimillionaire whose money came from land and cattle. He had sent his young daughter, Clara, to Europe to be educated and to get some culture. By 1901, she had returned to the U.S. and was presented to New York society as the richest girl in Texas. Now, when she returned to Texas, Clara found herself disgusted with the state of the Alamo and disturbed that the Long Barrack didn't even belong to the state. When a purchase price of $75,000 was negotiated for that structure, Clara fronted most of it. That is to say, her father's money paid for most of it. And much of her father's wealth at that stage came from his expansion of the Rabb Ranch that Martha Rabb Rogers had grown from 400 acres to 43,000. Mr. Driscoll doubled its size and turned it into his Palo Alto Ranch. So that's how a cigar-chomping Corpus Christi cattle queen unknowingly helped a young society woman save the Alamo. Ain't history grand? Until next time, God in Texas, y'all.